Rebellion within, brothers! Yes, so you're probably looking at this and wondering what the hell's going on. Alright, okay, tell a lie. You've seen the name of the video, you've seen the thumbnail, you know what's going on. I'm going to take your ordinary household deodorant sticks and I'm going to turn them into land speeders. Specifically javelin land speeders, because based on the size of them and this very embarrassingly destroyed land speeder, they're a lot bigger than the smaller, you know, Proteus size ones. So what are we doing? What are we looking at? Well, let's clear this space and then properly talk about this. Okay, that's better. All right, so yeah, why am I making vehicles out of deodorant sticks? Specifically, Lynx Africa. These are the smaller travel size ones that you can get. So as anyone knows in the sort of trash bashing space, Rick Priestley back in the day made a fantastic do-it-yourself grav tank using a deodorant stick. That's the size of like a Rhino, like it's quite a big vehicle. And I love the idea of doing that, but I didn't want to try and just make a Predator or something. I really like the idea of making, you know, a fast attack choice, because in an Iron Warriors Heresy army list, I always seem to have an abundance of fast attack slots that never get touched. So why not make some land speeders? Specifically based on the size of these, javelin land speeders. And this is the thing, because as intimidating as it can be to take something like a deodorant stick and try and turn it into a vehicle, this goes back to wargaming's sort of roots, doesn't it? This goes back to the sort of waste not, want not philosophy of taking the things that you have to hand and modifying them to actually, you know, be usable in the game or the games that you play. And land speeders, they're that interesting kind of vehicle where everyone knows what a land speeder looks like. Everyone recognizes a land speeder almost immediately from across the table, because there's something very iconic about that look. This Landspeeder Tempest is sort of a great shame, really, because it's a solid Forge World resin cast that I bought as part of a Black Templar's job lot off of a friend, and I put it in acetone to strip the paint, and I left it in too long. My hubris sort of saying, oh, it'll be fine in there a bit longer, and it's starting to actually eat into the resin itself. That's why you've got all these bits that have sort of cracked and started to come off. That's not from me dropping it on the floor or something. That's from the actual sort of acetone acting like acid and starting to dissolve the resin material itself. So, yeah, javelin land speeders out of deodorant sticks. Oh boy, I have never done this before. This is going to be a bit of a challenge, isn't it? Well, I've gone round, I've cleaned them, I've taken out the middle part. I've got to glue them so that they actually, you know, stick in place, and they're not going to fall apart mid-game. But it all comes down to preparation. I mean, I've had this idea cooking around in my head now for what feels like a year. And I'm not going to lie, it's a little intimidating, because I've never made something like this. And for some reason, even though this goes back to Warhammer's roots, you know, as you can see, sort of scale-wise with this apothecary, like it's a good size, there aren't many videos online that actually look at this, that actually look at making land speeders out of the kind of, or any sort of 40k vehicle out of the things that you have lying around the house. Well, I say 40k, more 30k. There are a few really good land speeder videos, as well as competitions that people entered back in the day. For whatever reason, this just never took off. So why don't we see if we can change that? I'm going to document my process for turning these into a little squad of javelins. And hey, if you're inspired enough to make your own, fantastic. Let's see what you come up with. So yeah, so I've got a rough idea of how I'm going to convert these. So weapons and weapon loadouts. Well, the javelin comes with what? A cyclone missile launcher and a heavy bolter. I think I've got enough heavy bolters. I know I've got more than enough heavy flamers. I don't think I've got enough multi-melters if I was to go for multi-melter equipment on them. But there's the option for las cannons, and there's the option for the Volkite culverins, which is good because, as you may have seen on the table, I've got this great big stack of sprues from the Dreadnought kit, and you can actually see the Volkite culverins there. I mean, these were designed to sort of sit side by side, so there's going to be a lot of challenges here as to how I actually make these and make them look correct. But I've got more than enough sort of bits that, you know, weren't initially intended for this kind of thing. You know, these are designed to be underslung on a Dreadnought or the side sponson on a vehicle. Like there's the Volkite coverings from this is just the standard Land Raider frame. I know I've got the bits to do this. It's just then a case of how we actually make this look right. But one thing I do want to point out, if you guys ever like get the old rapier batteries or get some, you know, printed up, the graviton cannon, these big suckers, in fact any rapier weapon, there's something very satisfying about just putting that on top and going, huh, that doesn't look too bad. So I don't know, there's a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different ways I could approach this, but I'm digressing because I'm being a little uncertain how to approach this, so let's just jump in and worry about the details later. Alright, let's do this. The first step is to use a heavy grit sandpaper and just rub that all over the deodorant sticks to prep the surface. It's one of the kind of questions that gets asked online as to how you actually manage to glue things to this glossy black plastic. Simplest solution, just rub that down with sandpaper and then all of a sudden super glue, hot glue, it'll go on there nicely. Now to get these things to stop turning and to get the lids firmly set in place, we're just going to use a hot glue gun. It's nothing outrageous, this isn't rocket science, we just need these things to be firm and locked in place. But just before we do that, I want to point out you can see that I've sanded the insides of the lids as well as the connector base. And one of the things I'm going to do is before I glue the lid on, I'm going to drop glue inside to try and gum up that central mechanism. This is an important part because if you can get the base to stop turning, your life becomes a whole lot easier with this project, rather than run the risk of it just accidentally twisting as you're trying to glue something to it later on. So glue inside, glue on the bottom, and then once that base is secured, then look at gluing the lid in place. And that's the thing, we're not doing anything outrageous here, we're just using hot glue. It's not something special, you can do this. That's the magic of these kind of projects. If I can do it, and I'm an idiot, I know you can do it. Okay, so with the body of the Landspeeder now glued together firmly, the question becomes, right, well, how do I actually turn this into a vehicle? Because it's all well and good having the body, and it's all well and good having the weapons that you plan to stick to the body, but that is not a Landspeeder, that's a deodorant can with a gun stuck to it. So I've had a route through my rubbish to see what bits and pieces I could use. I found this little thing from Star Monsters, which I think was some kind of collectible game or something. That is quite a nice size to go on the top of that, but it is a bit tall, so I'll probably snap the back off, you see, because then it actually rests a bit lower. And I'll probably use that for one of the command vehicle ones. This big bit here, some of you might recognise, it's from the, do you remember when Disney did that Buzz Lightyear film? Yeah, it's from that. It's one of the pods that the robots in the film come out of. I bought it as part of a toy set that was reduced to clear. Wonderful detail on the plastic toys, I'll give them that. And, you know, it has a play feature, but it's 3 of something. It's 3 of this bit. So I'm going to see if I can cut it and mould it and get it to fit underneath. I mean, not that pronounced, it'll probably be a bit more like that, or maybe even a bit further forwards, just so it looks a little less obvious like a deodorant can. Which finally brings us to the engine. So as we all know, the back end of a deodorant container is just a flat white disc or whatever colour. E-cigarette liquid lids quite happily fit in there, but that sticks out so much. However, there are other kinds of e-cigarette liquid lids, and I think that, although it's a little bit stubby, I think that's got a bit more of a retro flair to it. Now, there's a temptation to like saw it and try and stick that in there, but to be honest, I'd rather just drill a hole, make that hollow, or even put like a little detail of some kind of jet or something there, and then maybe detail around it with some stabilisation fins. Speaking of which, still got the 2 empty holes on the side, so these, if you ever had a carton of any fruit juice or anything in your life, you probably find this on the top. It is just one of those little tabs. You snap that sod off, and all of a sudden you've got all this wonderful detail on the inside, which can quite nicely fit on either side. Alright, so one little quirk I found with these e-liquid bottle tops is you can actually just carve a hole into the top, right? I don't know if you guys can see that, but yeah, you can just do that with a craft knife rather than using a drill. I did not know this. Necessity is the mother of all invention, and I can't find my drill, so I thought, well, what if I just, you know, sort of poke down and then start to turn? And I know you guys are probably struggling to see it because my big hand's in the way, but you see how it starts to make a little, you're sort of whittling like a little groove in the top, and all I'm doing is just turning the knife, turning the lid. I'm being careful not to stab myself because this is, you know, not for the faint-hearted, but look at that, in no time at all I've hollowed that out and I've created like a little knackered engine hole, jet engine hole. And don't get me wrong, you can clean this up and make it look a hell of a lot nicer than this. I've just done that in a couple of seconds, but all of a sudden that's a problem that was holding up this project taken care of. Okay, so gluing these juice bottle tabs to create those sort of engine intakes, manifolds, whatever you want to call them, we need to raise them up a bit because, again, we're combining things that ultimately don't want to go together. They weren't designed to go together. And I'm just using some bits of sprue that I've previously cut up with a pair of clippers to create spacers, to create risers to lift them forwards. I tried to model these with a bit of an angle to them to make it a bit more interesting. Ultimately, with how I paint these in the end, it doesn't really look that good anyway, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. There are many things in this project that with hindsight I would change. One of the things, first and foremost, has to be those big plastic Buzz Lightyear toy exhausts, whatever you want to call them, on the underside of each of the deodorant stick Landspeeders. The reality is they're not really that necessary and they don't really add too much to the project when you get to the end of it, but it felt right at the time, and a lot of these kind of projects is doing things that feel right. To focus on what we're doing here, so using some flexible filler, this is just the kind of cheap stuff that you can buy in any supermarket or Asda or Walmart, and we're using a scrap bit of balsa wood, a bit of wood to just smooth over those little imprints that tell you which direction to turn the deodorant stick. It's a simple process. You can do a lot of gap filling on a project like this if you want, but I'm trying to keep it as minimal as possible because there's going to be plenty of other challenges. For example, using a piece of cardboard to just fill that little hole at the back where the Buzz Lightyear toy connects to the body of the deodorant stick. So one of the sci-fi details that I wanted to try and replicate was that sensor dome pilot control pit, whatever it is, from the original Rick Priestley deodorant grav tank, right? Now, I didn't really fancy using a takeaway spoon or spork or anything like that on this, so I've gone for just taking a plastic bead and just sawing that in half. And I also found from my scrap box one of these little buttons from, I think it was from one of those air coolers, those little personal air coolers that you can get. That was just like the cold button. Just cut that up, and I don't think I used that in the end. But one of the most important stages at this point is ultimately I've glued a lot of things in place with hot glue, but I'm now going back over certain areas to gap fill using the old bicarbonate of soda, baking powder and super glue trick. So literally just a bead of super glue where you need to fill a gap or where you need to strengthen a point, and just sprinkle that over the top. Always recommend using an old brush to brush off the excess afterwards, but you can see you're going to need multiple layers to fill some of these gaps because they are quite substantial. Okay, let's actually look at how we're going to get all these bits to fit into place. So I've got a rough idea as to where I want the weapons. I've taken a couple of these turret bits from, I think it's some Mechanicus Dune crawler thing. But in terms of the top of the land speeders, I've made a little cardboard template of something that looks sort of vaguely like it would go on a Rhino or a Space Marine vehicle. I've got one of the Horus Heresy tank hatches, which I'll use on this build, as well as, of course, my little bead. And this is the whole thing about this project. We're not using excessively expensive materials. I made the template out of cardboard. I cut that out with scissors, traced that onto a piece of thin plastic card, and then cut that out using a craft knife. And you can layer that up and create that wonderfully sort of heavy industrial feel that 40k and 30k Space Marine vehicles typically have. And yes, of course, it helps to use actual 40k bits or Horus Heresy bits if you've got them. But at this point, we're just focused on getting the rough shapes in place. This is all about gap filling. This is all about armor panels. This is all about just getting things where they need to be and getting all the structural details sorted before we get to the fun bit of the actual detailing of this build. Okay, so the rear engine fins, like stabilization support fins, again, just using some thin plasticard, sort of cut to something that looks kind of right in my mind's eye. There wasn't any real design or templates or anything here, just some rectangles with the corners cut off to create that sort of sci-fi hexagon look, like something you'd see out of Star Wars or other 40k vehicles. A lot of the engine details, I think, kind of get hidden by the vast bulk of the vehicle. We don't tend to focus on the engines and these things. We're too busy focused on the front and the sides and the three-quarter shots and the weapons, of course. So this build's coming along now. Let's get to one of the more tedious parts of the build, which is, of course, riveting. Now, I love the idea of having the front sort of container lids of these things being these giant armored bulkheads that could be removed and repaired and replaced as they got sort of too damaged. So simplest way to replicate that look is to just draw a pencil line around it and then put rivets all the way around. But we're going to not just use plastic rod on this, we're going to do the old Mark V molecular bonding stud technique on this. So drilling little holes and then using a little 1mm metal ball bearing and gluing that in place. Imperial vehicles tend to be a bit of a challenge because you need these things to look manufactured. You can't just have them haphazard and chaotic like Orc vehicles or anything like that. But one of the good things is because they're so manufactured and sort of strict in their design philosophy, all you have to do is create something once and then replicate it and do it exactly the same on the next one. You know, I tried not to have any of the little metal ball bearings go missing. I tried to not have any of them look like they'd popped out because this isn't a vehicle that's in the midst of battle. This is a museum piece that is being forced back into battle, and they're going to have renovated it as best they can. They're going to have up-armored it as best they can, but then the reality is it's going into conflict after conflict and things are breaking and being retrofitted, and the older, sleeker, dark age of technology designs are slowly going away to be replaced by the more utilitarian, blocky look of 40k vehicles. Okay, so quick update on the land speeders. They're coming along really nicely. The riveting's getting done. Still adding some little greebly details where it's appropriate, but honestly, it's coming along just great. I've decided now is the time to actually put the tail fins on these. So if I pick up this one gingerly, you can see I've added this sort of like inspired by the more modern land speeders that you get in 40k. Kind of tail, fin, spoiler. But this, oh boy, this is so rickety. This is so difficult. So I've already done it twice just to get a feel for how pig awkward this is. But essentially we're balancing three pieces of plastic, right? So you've got your foils that go on, you've got your foil that goes on top, and then you've got the two support struts either side that overhang a little bit just to give it that sort of, you know, heavy industrial look. These are just the actual tops. It's just a thin piece of plasticard with a thicker piece at the back, and then two thin bits at the front, and then using a bit of sanding paper just to, you know, get the kind of the curve on it to make it a bit more aerodynamic. I know you can't really see that, but it's there. Right, so the way I do this, man, this is so awkward. If I swear at all at this point, just bear with me because it's so cool. And now I'm doing this around a camera, so it's going to be even harder. We're using a combination, right, I need to get the lid off this. We're using a combination of super glue and plastic glue, but basically, right, I'm actually going to move the camera as well, hang on. So we've got our victim here. Let's see if I can do this live on air. Yeah, the little nozzle on this got gummed up forever ago, and no amount of burning it seems to clear it, so I'm just using it as a stick to just get the glue where it needs to be. So get a good thick coating on there, right? And then we're going to sort of roughly, right, you're going to love just how janky this is. We're going to roughly hold it where we want it, right? Okay, great. We just give that a minute to set. It's not going to set iron hard because we're just loosely holding that in place. And let go of that, let that drop down a little bit. Still trying to hold that to the body. I've not actually glued the bottom of this yet. This is all focusing on the top because this isn't, see what I mean? It's so pig awkward. My goodness, right, come on, you just stay on there just long enough that I can get a bit more glue from the container. Smear that on there. Hoping this is, I'm not looking at the camera at all for this because this is so awkward. I just need to focus on getting this done. This one, don't forget to turn the opposite one the other way. Right, so then we're balancing it between the two. You can see why this is causing my blood pressure to just skyrocket. Look at this, right. Okay. Now that's it for the plastic glue. We're not going to use any more plastic glue at this point. Great, hallelujah. Right, now we get the really awkward job of trying to jiggle these pieces in line at the bottom. So you see how right now that kind of space is the same on either side. I mean, this is still wibbly wobbly, look, right? But the idea is you get that just right, just good enough so there's enough space either side at the front. And then you get the super glue and you put a tiny bit, not too much, you need it to slide down good. And on this side, good, nearly good. Come on, where's a, I need a pokey tool because you need it to actually go down the crack there. Lovely. So I just try and take my hands off in a moment, because this is going to continue to be wobbly. It's the base bit that we're hoping is sticking. Ah, no, it's fallen down on one side. That's where the sod comes into it. Okay, so now, because we're trying to get it, see, that one's too far back. Yeah. Come on. I think we're all the way to the edge, aren't we? Oh, nearly. Come on. Oh, I'm so glad I'm never going to have to do this again. I will never build 3 more of these again. Not like this, anyway. Come on. There you go. No, see, now that's at an angle. That's no good. So I'm going to try and push. Because I'm not even too worried about that down angle looking so ugly, because at this point I just need it to be on there and glued. So then when we're actually happy with it, drop a super glue either side at the top. Like, it's so finicky, even my hands are shaking. My hands don't normally shake. Okay, alright, I think, yeah, that's fine. Whew. Now, I've been skipping a lot of the recording at this point because it's nothing too exciting to write home about. I'm literally just going around and riveting is incredibly riveting to watch, da-dum-tis. And unlike some YouTubers where it's, you know, oh, let's do a little funny skit where I'm making them magically appear on the model. No, that takes like 30 photos and stop motion animation, and I'm not doing that. So I'm just going to do all the riveting and then bounce back. But if you don't know the process to riveting, I'm going to put that one down because that's still drying. Dab a super glue, cut a piece of plastic rod, tip of the knife onto the dot, onto the piece, done. You don't need to watch me doing that. But yeah. It's starting to look like something now, isn't it? It's starting to look like an actual vehicle and not just a random assemblage of rubbish. And the occasional Games Workshop bit glued on. But yeah, it's getting there. It's getting there. Okay, so that takes care of the riveting. For the most part, that is actually done now. Pretty much every panel that I want riveted has got rivets on it or has had holes drilled into it to sort of look like those inset rivets that you get even on the sort of command tank, as it were, the command land speeder. That's had some work done. So they're looking really good. I've figured out how I'm mounting these Volkite culverins. As it turned out, I had quite a few of the ammo connectors or ammo belts or whatever from the Contemptor Dreadnought, so I'm just using those as like improv little arms to hold those in place. So I'll figure out a way of connecting that, maybe with a bit of pipe or something. The idea is that the thing would be able to turn, so I want there to be a little bit of clearance, but it doesn't need to be a massive amount. They're not actually going to turn in real life just because this project's complicated enough as it is without adding that. But yeah, I also figured out how I'm going to get the command tank, or the command speeders Volkite in place, because I had this bit, as I showed earlier. I think it's from like a toy truck or something. Figure I'm going to have that as the arm, and then for the actual Volkite itself, it's designed to be under the arm Dreadnought Contemptor one, but as you can see from this little bit that I've put on there, I'm going to have it suspended like that, so it's going to be on the side. Probably set down a little bit. This is the finicky side of this kind of project, because you're making bits that inherently don't want to go together, trying to make them play ball. So yeah, something like that, because it shows that as these vehicles have been used and destroyed over and over and rebuilt and repaired over and over, they can't just keep relying on the mountings that they sort of were built with back in the Dark Ages or the earliest days of the Crusade. They're having to improvise. Hence we're no longer going for one on either side, we're just going for one singular mounting and going to stick it there. So that's kind of the idea there. Next step, one of the things that's jumped out to me as I've been doing the last of the rivets is I forgot to add little wings, because if you look at any land speeder, look at the Javelins, look at the modern 40k land speeders, look at the old Rogue Trader tanks, they always have little wings coming out either side, either straight out, pointed down, or pointed up. I think pointed up would look weird, straight out would be fine, but I'm going to have them angled down slightly. So probably something about that big, about there, and that should do it. But we finally get there, don't we? We add the little side wings on, and although I don't do it in this video, you'll see at the end, you can use these as mounting points for, because I know hunter-killer missiles are a popular equipment choice on javelins. You can use these little wings as mounting ports. That's what I do for my actual command vehicle, rather than just having a single tube from the tank accessory sprue just stuck on the side of the vehicle. I have two little rockets from some plastic toy tank that I bought years ago, just stuck on the very tips of the wings. Gives it a bit of a Soviet fighter aircraft feel, which I think is quite fitting for something that's very old and sort of not quite, it's still a lethal modern weapon in the context of the Horus Heresy, but it's showing its age. Finally, we can get to the good bit of this kind of project, right? The detailing. So, as you can see on this Landspeeder, I've taken things like a Horus Heresy searchlight from the vehicle upgrade frame, also known as tank accessories, tank accessory frame, and things like this little detail here, which normally lives on a Contemptor Dreadnought's Power Fist, or Gravis Power Fist, to power, I imagine, a melter gun built into the hand, but it could be anything, which is why it kind of fits on a build like this, because it's these kind of tiny details that normally we save after a project. So we end up with all these sprues with, yes, guns that are nice and easy to put on things, but also things like, oh, this is the kind of the sight, the camera, the scope from the las cannon, the Gravis las cannon set. Well, we can put that on the build somewhere. Same as these little power-looking nodule things that would go on the Gravis Power Fist. I mean, admittedly, this one with the magazines, that's a bit too obviously for a the combi bolter that lives in the Power Fist, so we probably won't use that bit. But it's all these extra little details that now, ultimately, will make these vehicles come alive. In the same way, things like the hatch or the little doors from the back of the Predator kit, those sort of things immediately identify as a 40k or Horus Heresy kit. Things like these little details also help do that, these little greeblies. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to just completely cover these things in details and basically skip ahead now until the weapons are actually in place, because then that's basically it. We're almost at painting. Now, the reality is you could magnetize these weapon loadouts if you wanted. I mean, okay, certain things like the hunter-killer missiles, you're probably always going to take them on your javelin, so you could glue those down. I'm just straight up pinning these weapons in place for the pure sake of I don't see myself changing the loadout anytime soon. And if I'm going to build more Landspeeder Javelins, well, I could always just do this again, couldn't I? I mean, I've learned you learn a lot when you make three of something. You learn, this it's an entirely new challenge at the end of the day. And there's a lot of things from this project that I've absolutely fallen in love with, and I know I'll replicate elsewhere. And a lot of it is just finding those little patterns, finding those little bits, those little side case uses for things that ultimately they weren't designed for, but they just work so nicely. Like these tank turret bits from the Onager Dune Crawler kit, they just work so well. But finally, it's time to base these things. And hey, easiest trick in the world. You need a flight stand. Take a plastic champagne flute that you can get at any dollar store. Cut the stem off of that. There you go. Drill a hole in the bottom of these things. You're done. And there it is. My deodorant can speeder. Deodorant stick speeder. What can I say? They're fantastic. I love them. Like I said, there are little things that I would change. I think going back, I would change the jet engines. I'd change how the bottom, like the actual base, connects to the deodorant body itself. And don't get me wrong, painting these things up takes the longest time, bar none, because there is no there is no tutorial that you can follow for painting these things. There is no you are painting a vehicle that no one else has ever painted before. This is entirely unique to you. And I had some ideas of things that I wanted to achieve. I mean, I wanted the look where, yes, it's an Iron Warriors vehicle, so you've got the hazard stripes on there, but it's not covering the entirety of that plastic lid. It's more a band that goes around it, and then it's been, of course, smashing into things and crashing through infantry and buildings and into other vehicles, so it's gotten worn and chipped off. And there are little things like, I think the cardboard on the side of the command vehicle, really I should have just used plasticard for that rather than cardboard, because it didn't take the metal paint well. It soaked too much into the fibres of the cardboard. But then other areas like painting up the little lenses on all the little scopes and sensor arrays, what a dream. What an absolute dream. You can challenge yourself when you're painting these kind of vehicles. You can really reinvent what a look for your faction is. I've loved, as part of the Horus Heresy, painting a lot of Iron Warrior vehicles that have got more black in them rather than just being a heavy metal with bronze or brass accents. It's adding those little touches. And don't get me wrong, these aren't 100% finished. I need to go back and put decals on them. I need to finish the hazard striping on the underside. But as you can see, scale-wise, it's pretty much perfect, isn't it? I've spoken with people online about it. I don't think anyone has any issue with these showing up to a game. Oh, you know, Games Workshop official events and so on. Yeah, of course not. Of course not. But as you can see, I would say arguably smaller than a rhino. It's certainly not wider than a rhino, but it is long. They are long. They are bigger. Let's be brutally honest. It's bigger than a basic land speeder. But then you look at the Javelin kit, and yeah, it's a lot bigger than a Proteus. Honestly, I'm just really happy with them. I think this is the thing. If you're looking at this video and going, oh, he should have changed this bit, oh, I wouldn't have done that. Fantastic. I want to see you make yours. I want to see you make your own deodorant can speeders, because honestly, they are a absolute blast to paint. And they just fit so nicely into the heresy setting. They've got the provenance, they've got the historicity, as it were. It is like raiding the museum to fight off the invaders. You know, these are things that aren't meant to be used anymore. But hey, it's the end of all time, so, you know, crack open the the museums of Olympia and get those speeders flying. Would I make more? That is the big question. Oh goodness, it's a hard one. I could, if I find out the Volkite Culverin layout isn't strong enough, I could make them up with las cannons or of course, the Cyclone missile launcher array. The reality is, am I going to make any right now? I'm in no rush. I'm in no rush. These ones, I'm going to stick them on the tabletop and see how they fare first. I think that's the best way to do it. All right, well, as always, thank you all for watching, boys and girls. I hope that you've found this video in some way interesting, inspirational, you name it. You know, let me know in the comments down below if you make your own. Head on over to Facebook and Reddit and 4chan and all those wonderful places and show people your progress if you do make your own deodorant stick land speeders. I want to see them. I want to see them. Not enough people are making these things. All right. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next episode, my brothers. Iron without, brothers!